I'm a 40-year-old white male, about 5 feet and 11 inches tall. And I wouldn't say that I'm fat, but I'm a little between 200 and 220 pounds. I love kids, the way they taste, the way they smell, even the way they walk. I'll start off by telling you my most recent work. And no, I will not be giving my name. It was around 4 p.m. on Saturday. I was at the local park and I saw a woman who was maybe in her mid-30s. She had a child with her who looked around 7. That's the perfect age for me. I started walking over towards where the woman was sitting. As I got closer, the child ran off towards the slides and the mother yelled, "Don't play too rough, Dylan." I sat down beside her and said, "Cute kid," in a rather intrigued voice. She said thank you nervously and picked up a book. I asked her, "How can you read with your child playing alone?" "It's a dangerous neighborhood, you know." She just shrugged it off and continued to read. So I told her, "You really should be watching your child. Anything could happen to little Dylan." It was obvious at this point I was starting to creep her out. She called for Dylan and said that we have to go. Dylan ran over and looked at me and asked his mother, "Why does this man keep looking at me?" She said, "Let's just go home, Dylan." I sat until she and Dylan walked away. Then I got up and followed them. I must have followed them for 3 blocks before they went inside of a 2-story house. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of the house, and wrote down the address. I went home to prepare for the glorious night ahead. I grabbed a duffel bag and filled it with rope, duct tape, a few knives, and even some pliers. I grabbed a photo of my father, who was currently sentenced to life in prison for murdering 15 women when he was 28. I was just 12 years old at the time. I still don't know why I grabbed the photo. I left my house and began walking down the street in the direction of the woman's house. On the way, I stopped by the store and grabbed a bottle of lighter fluid. When paying for it, I smiled at the clerk and said, "This should light up that bitch's night." I left the store and continued to walk. I finally arrived at the woman's house. She had every damn light on in the house. Bitch must be afraid of the dark. I walked around the house and stared at them from the garden. She was in the kitchen, cooking what appeared to be a Hot Pocket. I always like to toy with my victims, so I slowly walked up to the window and banged on it loudly. I heard the woman yell out, "What the hell was that?" I made my way to the circuit box and cut the power, and then the phone line. I walked over to the back door where I saw her yelling at someone on her cell phone. I could tell she wasn't pleased with the person that she was talking to. She yelled out, "I don't care if you're in a meeting. Get home now." I crouched down and slowly began picking the lock on the door. Then I waited for her to leave the room. When I entered the kitchen, I noticed that she had left her phone on the counter. Such a stupid thing to do. I picked it up and quietly made my way upstairs. I could hear her trying to calm down Dylan. I walked over to the room where they were. Dylan screamed and turned around. "I told you this was a dangerous neighborhood," I said. I slammed the bedroom door and I held up my knife. I told them both to get on the floor. I tied them up and told the mother, "This is what happens when you ignore advice from someone who looks like me." She asked me not to hurt her son. "I'm not going to hurt him much," I said. She began to scream, so I pulled out the duct tape and taped her mouth, and then Dylan's. I began to gently stroke his face with the back of my hand. The mother tried as hard as she could to get free, but it was useless. I told her that I love children and I would never want to see them get hurt, but this time is different. And I said that because of her negligence, Dylan has to suffer. She shook her head furiously and again tried to scream. I just laughed and shook my head. I reached into my bag and pulled out a carving knife. I dragged Dylan over near an outlet and plugged in the carving knife. As I turned it on, I pressed it to his arm. Blood began spewing out as Dylan tried with all his might to scream. I put my mouth on the open wound and swallowed a couple of mouthfuls. All while the mother was trying desperately to get free. "Bitch, stop fucking trying! It's useless!" I yelled. I used the carving knife to cut open Dylan's shirt and then pressed it to his stomach. As the blood rushed out, I took my hands and pulled out his guts and took a huge bite. I could tell at this point he was damn near dead, So I walked over to the mother and pulled out the bottle of lighter fluid. I poured it all over her. "This is all your fault," I whispered. Walking out of the house, I continued to pour the lighter fluid down the hallway, all over the walls, and on the carpeting lining the stairs. I made my way to the door and opened it. I dropped a match onto the lighter fluid and closed the door. I went home and cleaned myself up. About an hour later, I returned to the house. By this time, there were cops and firefighters all over. I heard a man yell, "God damn it, do something! My wife and son are in there!" Just then, 3 firefighters came out of the house carrying the bodies. It was obvious what happened, but I waited a few minutes and walked over to a cop. "What happened here?" I asked. "It looks like there was someone trying to use a fire to cover up a murder," he said. "That's just awful," I said. I walked off down the street. A few days later on the news, I saw that there was a new lead in the case. Well, I guess it's time for me to find a new victim.